Hello.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
Let me know how I can support you today.
Okay. I think today largely we're going to be working through the draft recommendation that I sent out to folks, but if there are other pieces of the conversation where you can help us kind of
Sure.
find some shared alignment on things or any notes, actions out of the conversation that I need to be aware of, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, I'll be taking notes for sure. All right then. Start my document.
Nice and welcome.
Afternoon. How are you all doing?
Well, yourself?
I'm good. I'm trying to catch up. But back in the beautiful Northwest, the sun is shining. Life's pretty good.
But when did your stint? You were in Portugal, right?
I was in Portugal and then South Africa, the UK, Italy. So I bounced around a bit.
Okay.
Yeah, not a bad deal by any means.
No.
But looking forward to catching up and seeing where you all are at.
Yeah. Great.
Lucy and I are going to be in Scotland to see offshore wind in action. But also, I'm staying a few extra days because it's Scotland. So that's going to be almost exactly a month from now.
Awesome.
All you world travelers, I'm going to the lake this weekend, so
I
we'll
think
get into
that's a
some
good idea. Given what the temperature looks like, going to the lake seems like the best idea I can think of.
yeah.
What lake are you going to, Jeff?
Oh, we have our little sailboat up at Detroit Lake, so it's just an hour.
Oh.
But this is the last weekend because the lake level is getting so low, we've got to haul it out. So
Yeah, we drove by Detroit Lake on family vacation a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, I've seen it lower for sure, but it's like, yeah, it's
oh
not
yeah.
it's not gonna be going up anytime soon.
Jeff,
No.
I saw yours and your wife's, I think now wife, sailing journey vlog
Oh yeah.
online. That's awesome. I'm in Portland actually right now for a sailing course on the Columbia.
Are
But
you really? Oh, great.
yeah. Yeah, so I read that. I was like, "Oh, this is wild." Really cool stuff.
Jeff has like lived on boats. Like I was talking about how I don't like the saltiness of like the seawater, and Jeff's like, you get used to it.
Yeah. It does great things for the volume of your hair.
Oh, and my hair becomes magnificently curly in
Yeah.
seawater. It's the tackiness on the skin that bothers me, but the hair is cool.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the effects of seawater swimming on hairstyle?
Yes. Yes, we are. There's a reason why salt spray is a thing that people use. Really important information for the science discussion. Very, very relevant.
Yeah.
Look, if I go to the beach and the wind and the hair and I'm doing field work, it's a circus here.
Oh yeah, you and I had similar hair. I very
It goes
relate.
crazy. Yeah.
It's just a whole new because it gets its own zip code. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think this might be who we have for today's session. So we can get started. Just to kind of clarify, I sent you all a bunch of calendar invites just because scheduling is so hard. My hope is that we can get you for one or many if you have the time and ability, but we'll just be focusing on the recommendation draft that I sent out to the group after having sent all of those invites. Hopefully that didn't get lost in just the deluge of stuff. But I'll have it up on the screen here today too. And my goal is that through the conversations we have in August, we can get the bones of that language together, recognizing that there are still some pieces that we probably won't even see by the time the September draft comes out to the roundtable. And I can talk about that more in just a couple minutes. And Karina can give us an update too on the work that she's leading for OPAC on research agenda stuff. Seeing some stuff in the chat. Great. Okay, yeah, no worries. We'll make good use of that first hour. So yeah, my goal today is to walk through what I sent to you all. We can give an update on where we are with all the different parts and pieces. If anyone has any questions about what's been going on, I know there was, news last week that you're probably all aware of, that the wind energy areas have been rescinded by BOEM. I have a call with them on Monday to just ask some clarifying questions about, what happens if in the future someone wants to bring back those exact same WIAs. What's the process? Just so I can better understand, what the deal is. But that's kind of what we know at the moment. Does anybody else have anything else you want to open with? Go ahead, Karina.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure folks know that the OPEC working groups, the OPEC stack, excuse me, working groups on the research agenda are, at work this summer. There's a public meeting schedule. Similarly, multiple meetings, different subgroups, just to kind of enable the working in public process, so that they have plenty of opportunities to meet. They might abandon some of those meetings if they don't need them all. But just for your awareness, they're publicly posted on the OPEC stack website. Anyone is welcome to join. There's no public comment, but if it's a small group and one or two people show up and they have relevant conversational information or they want to participate, that's fine, but just formally no public comment at those work sessions. So, and they're really just digging in, and they're, I would just say that scientists are they haven't been super focused on the policy or the they hear the news and they're like, does the state still want this because of the WIAs being so, like, there's been a lot of education around that to understand the context for their work. And we've been trying to make it as evergreen as possible in the current context, since the snapshot in time, like literature review, isn't going to be that helpful right now, for example. So and we hope to bring the product, the first round, back to either the full roadmap process or this subgroup, or both, for your feedback, because we're going to iterate on it. So just for your awareness, that's part of our intended process.
Yeah, so we're here to talk about two pieces that kind of fit together. One of them is this research agenda piece, and the other one is the concept of a science collaborative, both for Oregon specifically, and then participation in this West Coast Science Collaborative that California is just starting up now. So maybe before we get into what I've written as starter language, Karina, can we dig in a little bit more on, what we ought to expect to see out of the work that Stack is doing, when we might see some initial lists, and kind of how you envision the collaboration happening between our group and
in terms of like deadlines or touch moments of products visibility in a sort of more formal sense, I'm expecting in the lead up and at the fall OPAC meeting to have kind of, in that October period, we'll have some formal documents for feedback, and then final deliverables we're thinking sometime in January, towards the end of January. And that seemed to land okay with the team and their schedule. So that just in terms of timeline. In general, we have 3 sub teams working. Oh, sorry, did you have a question, Julia, before?
I just want to remember to do a follow-up, but finish everything you're saying. Do
Okay.
not, this is for future.
Yeah, and I can share, we updated our chart. Our chart got updated at the last OPAC meeting. I'm happy to share that again. So, but we used to be like kind of linked to the WIAs and the BOEM process, and we updated in part to connect more to the state roadmap process, because it made more sense, obviously. So that was one of the changes. But we expect to have sort of 3, maybe 2-3 portions. One is a research prioritization framework. So there is a huge landscape, seascape, sub-seascape, above the sea, seascape of questions, right? Research questions that people have. And it's really daunting, even for the scientists on the team, because not all of them have expertise in all the areas. And so what we thought would be helpful and evergreen is what would you use to prioritize which questions are relevant to do and address for the questions that Oregonians have and that are locally relevant, for which there is no existing answer or information or insufficient information. So there's going to be some components to how those get ranked and run through the framework. And that's what we want to do an initial run through it with the roadmap and with others to get a sense of whether it's hitting things well or not. So the specific weightings, the specific criteria are in development right now, but I think that's going to be one of the main products. The other thing is going to be an analysis by the team of topical areas that are relevant to the process for which there are questions. Like what do we think the knowledge gaps are? And what is the framework you would go through to identify if those knowledge gaps are real or perceived, right? Because the scientific community may know more than the perceptions of people on the ground who are not scientists, not working in the area. And so we're taking the input, like what are the community questions? What is the process the scientists would go through to help distill what do we already know enough about from existing research, or what can be translated from other areas, what can be modeled, and what are the highest priority questions that we have insufficient information for Oregon that are important to the process. And then we're probably going to take, within the areas of expertise of a few of the scientists on the team, will detail an answer to that specific question, because we don't have, given the breadth of questions coming in, it will be impossible to address them all. And so we'll provide a few examples of what that might look like and leave that as a example of how to proceed. We will probably capture a snapshot of some of the relevant research and sort of our understanding of it right now. So there's at least a starting point, but I think those are the three kind of outputs you should anticipate seeing.
Julia?
This dovetails really well with another process that NWF is engaged in regionally and with kind of an emphasis on California. This isn't totally ready for prime time, so I'm not talking about it a lot in like larger spaces, but there's the marine, what are we calling it? The Marine Science Workshop, which is kind of like the West Coast version of the State of the Science for offshore wind, but we're using a different name and trying to make it easier for tribes and government agency folks to attend by how we're framing it up. But the folks at Monterey Bay Aquarium and NRDC and some consultants we're working with are really leading the way on that. But I'm at the kind of like steering committee level. Lucy and Shayna, who are at NWF, are also engaged in that space. And I'm just bringing this up because we're doing some similar things to what Karina lined up, but from obviously a little bit of a different perspective and more regional. And I have kind of an organizer mindset in every space that I come into. So I've been really insistent, and people are very open to this, by the way. It's not like I'm pushing something that isn't popular, but I'm being really insistent that we create products out of that space and that we frame up the discussions that we're having to create products that can be informative for the big questions that we're getting on the West Coast. And that includes kind of a little bit of what Karina was getting at, like the questions that are that we think we don't have answers to, but that's more of a perception thing than reality. Like I think the other kind of big, hard to wrap your mind around thing about what's real and what isn't is trying to figure out what you can know at what stages, right? What is a reasonable amount of information and level of information that you can have? Because I think a lot of the questions that people have that are very good questions and very real concerns can't be answered until you're at the COP stage, right? You need to know, like, what is the anchoring mechanism? Where are they going to be located more specifically, right? These really, really nitty-gritty questions, you can't answer every hypothetical, right? And so I think part of the outcome is we're hoping, I think, to be able to start articulating like what you can know and when, and how you can, like what the process is, how you structure the process so that you feel confident that those concerns and questions can be addressed and answered at the appropriate time in the process. As well as, and a lot of the stuff you just outlined, Karina, I think is also what we're hoping to accomplish on a smaller scale because it's just one science conference, right? But I think there's going to be some really helpful.
Well, I think it'll be, you know, yes, it's a team and they're working iteratively,
Yeah.
but they're not, this is not like they're not getting funded to work on this. So it's going to be
Yeah.
modest input of, you know, volunteered time. So.
But all I'm saying is, like, I think there's going to be some really interesting outputs coming from this science conference as well. The people being invited to that conference are, by and large, literally scientists, right? You know what I mean? And so I'm just making sure that the way we're framing up the discussion is answering some of the priority questions that our communities are having, and that we're creating publicly facing products that we can, you know, say, hey, here's what we know. So that conference isn't just for that like select group of people, but that the outcome of it can be useful in both the roadmap process and other processes. So just wanted to say that's going to be, and the timeline wise, like that conference is in October. So any of those outputs would be coming, like I'd say at the earliest, like a month after the conference. So timeline wise, we're talking like November probably for a lot of those outputs.
Quick question, and please feel free to punt it, and I could catch up with people because I haven't been engaged in the process for the last little while. A little unclear what our charge is then, because Karina, kind of what you mentioned seems to overlap with what I thought we were supposed to be doing here, and I'm trying to figure out, are we duplicating responsibility? Are we going to all stump on each other's feet, or where do we? Yeah, that's why I'm sort of lost. Can someone clarify?
I can help clarify a little bit on the OPEC. So we got our charge actually before this effort.
Okay.
But we had to we needed to deal with some administrative matters and bolster the memberships on the membership on the stack. It was just sort of and then things changed under our feet about, you know, different processes and timelines. So we've been kind of adjusting to that. So just that may help. I think also that the stack is OPAC is going to, at some point, I think, provide feedback on the roadmap. And so OPAC wanted their team, their science team, to also kind of like weigh in and give them some framing. So yes, there may be duplicative work in the themes, but I think also the participants are very different because the stack is a technical and scientific team. And this grouping here is broader. You know, it has a whole range of participants with different backgrounds and expertise. So I think they're complementary in some ways, but yeah, there could be maybe a lot of people time on this. I don't know. Jeff, go ahead.
I just one other thing. I'm so sorry, but just really, really quick. I also feel like this is a roadmap process that's more about process.
Yeah.
And what you're engaging in over there is way more about like, here's the actual science, here's some answers to these questions. So I kind of do feel like it dovetails. We're here to kind of identify like the questions and what are the gaps, and like, and you guys are also doing that, but like we can inform each other because you're in both spaces. And
we're trying to do like a co-design
yeah.
thing, right? Like we're
Exactly.
we're going to use the outputs from the informal roadmap group, from this group, to inform what are the universe of questions that people have, and then what are the science questions in addition, right?
Yeah, for what it's worth, Bryson, I see us including the stack outputs as an appendix to the roadmap to say, here is Oregon's best look at the moment for what we need for a research agenda. So if the stack work is the what, the roadmap is kind of the what do we do with it question. So we can be identifying resource needs. We can be identifying what is the process then for actually addressing these research needs, and what are those challenges that we need maybe the legislature or state leadership to step up and give us some direction where we can identify a process there. It's also, as was mentioned, kind of an opportunity for a broader vetting to say, we have some additional questions, concerns. How do they fit in with the stack product? Do they fit in Where else do they fit in? And then because the roadmap is broader, stuff like what Julia is talking about could be ivy on the pillar, if you will, of, what are the other ways in which we can think about the research needs for the region.
Okay. I think I got that clearer. That helps me out. Thanks a lot.
Bryson, I'm so glad that you're here and participating again, in part because I just want to add one area that I just added, in notes to our stack work group and the universe of questions and the categories that we're not there. I think there are still a lot of kind of questions specific to design of anchors and mooring lot, right? There's a lot of tech engineering kind of questions still. And I don't think those are well represented in our in either of these processes, although people do have a lot of questions about materials, designs, the robustness to storms, the conditions at sea. Like, I think it would be great to get your input. I mean, I'm going to be, just so you know, I'm going to be poking you on that one, or for help on how to kind of get the summary of that.
Okay, that helps me, and I guess I was asking these questions just trying to get a context for providing feedback on your document here, Jeff. Because I look at it quickly. I'm like, well, how broad is our mandate? Is it to look at the opportunities and challenges for Oregon writ large around an innovation ecosystem, or is it purely around just deploying technology in Oregon waters? Because those sort of are connected but different. So my quick read of this was we're very sort of focused on mitigating potential impacts to the ecosystem within the framework here, rather than a broader view of what is the innovation ecosystem needed to support a offshore energy system in the state. And I just was sort of trying to figure out where to help and be the most productive.
Do you have any specific recommendations or a vision for what that is? I mean, feel free to toss it into the conversation.
Okay.
Because if that's a part of Oregon's future and the path we could take that helps us along the road to offshore wind, well, maybe that deserves to be elevated in the roadmap as part of the path that we just haven't considered yet.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's good. Now I'll try and keep that vision on as I participate here, because it definitely seemed everything was sort of to the build or not build. And I'm like, well, we should probably plan and also look beyond that. How do we keep good jobs in the state? How do we continue to be part of this ecosystem if it does move? How do we reap benefits at every stage? And a lot of that will become around, how do we do new innovation? How do we do maintenance? How do we do new technologies at sea and things? So it sounds like our bandwidth is wide enough. Focus is on definitely how do we go from here to maybe or maybe not doing it. But I think showing that broader possibility is important.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I have a focus group planned with supply chain industry representatives from Oregon to try to get the sense of kind of that piece of the ecosystem and the life cycle.
Yeah.
But the innovation piece, we haven't really had that voice in our conversations yet. So,
okay, no, that's good. Good
yeah,
to get that perspective.
And if I could poke you on one of those to add to Karina's pokes, I heard just the other day that the industry is looking at ways to do maintenance at sea rather than having to tow into a port for maintenance.
Yeah.
That seems to be like a really important innovation that could affect to what extent we need to develop Coos Bay as a place that you could tow a foundation into.
Yeah.
Or how far you have to tow. I mean, it affects, how full Humboldt's dance card gets if they're the main port. So, I mean, you talk about kind of a game-changing innovation. I think that's one of them, but I don't know much about it.
No, there's a lot in that space. I think globally industry players are looking at me like the ports infrastructure is such a massive sort of injury stranglehold, shallow section that you need to innovate how to do it differently. And then maybe even building in modular ways at sea as opposed to doing just maintenance. Yeah. We can't all drag stuff to Rotterdam to go and get fixed and then bring it back. That's not going to work. So, so no, there's definitely lots in there. And I think that's where you'll get alignment with the feds more and some of the DOEs and the navies and the folks like that to help fund this moving forward. Okay, I'll keep that in mind as we move forward here. That helps me out. Thank you.
I think that also highlights a broader theme, is maybe the right word, around, especially recommendations around the science, recommendations inside the roadmap around science and research, is that because of the uncertainty generated by the federal level actions that are really slowing down even offshore wind that has enthusiastic support, which would be those are the projects coming online in California, right? Are the kind of projects that would provide us with like real information in the Pacific Ocean for floating offshore wind, right? That's what everyone's like really hungry for, is like something beyond just modeling, right? But this is a innovative, ever-changing, evolving industry. And I think like it puts us, anything we could be doing is kind of a moving target on some level because of that. So I think that's one of the challenges that you face, Jeff, is like framing this up in a like, this could look really different in 2 years. We're going to have an ongoing iterative process around how we approach all renewable energy sources, right? But particularly floating offshore wind, because it's just so nascent that it's evolving and changing like annually in ways that are like substantial, right? So that's just like, I think one of our challenges is how we frame this up needs to include like, this isn't like a one and done kind of situation.
Right. Yeah, so that would be something to keep an eye on in the draft recommendation. And we did have a couple things in there about keeping an eye on the industry as it's changing and giving that responsibility. If I recall correctly, it was either to OPAC or to state agencies to be keeping a finger on that pulse. Yeah. So we have, Karina, you described, providing a framework and some examples of what it might look like to take a few of the topic areas kind of to the end, and then the knowledge gaps. I don't imagine, but correct me if I'm wrong, I don't imagine that you are expecting that the knowledge gaps product is the list for Oregon. That it's like, as you said, this is volunteer time. This is let's get started.
And what you would do to maybe, the problem is if we generate a list now and we know nothing's going to happen for, say, 5 to 10 years,
Right.
those gaps may be filled by looking at what is developed elsewhere. A lot of those questions could be answered in the interim. And so it's not a good use of our time, I think, to all of us, right now to get that comprehensive list. And so what we think is useful is, if this starts again, and I think one of the recommendations might be fund a process to do these things and take these steps to understand that landscape. Because as you see, there is limited time and volunteer work on this sort of thing, and it's massive, right? So if you really care about addressing constituent or resident concerns, you need to actually fund a process to look at them and to identify what are the technical and scientific questions that will help mitigate, address, those concerns or answer the questions that people have. I'm saying that for myself, like I'm thinking ahead. I'm like, yeah, so if you want to do this, you need to fund that process.
Yeah, and I think to sort of build off what Karina said, and Jeff, I don't know how it comes into here. Do you think putting that how this occurs, if Karina and the stack are doing the what, and this is the how, I think it's also important to sort of building off what Julia said. We shouldn't be waiting for California to put turbines in the water to understand. Yes, that's a very important part of it because that's the Pacific ecosystem, but the technology is getting deployed elsewhere. We should be learning questions everywhere else, not like, cool, we're good, just let's hang out for a decade and wait and see what California does. Like there's so much for us to learn that I think the state needs to invest in that. I feel strongly that the feds will come back and they will continue to invest in this again. And let's go learn what the rest of the world's doing. Let's be part of that so that when it does come to our shore, if it comes to our shore, we're well positioned and we just don't start this conversation again in a decade.
And
So-
actually, oh, sorry. Lucy, I'm hoping you can correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you don't know, but I feel like it's Portugal, maybe. There's some places that we have good relationships with. I think China's doing it too, but There's some places that are going to be doing deeper floating offshore wind, and that's coming online in Europe. I should just say Europe, that's a safe bet. But either way, it's like that will be data in a different ecosystem, but that's deeper. Because like one of the concerns people are bringing up is this isn't like Scotland because those are shallower, right? You know, and they're smaller
and Portugal's in
turbines.
an upwelling system, which a lot of people are interested in specifically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like that's like I think like really gleaning information from places that are more apples to apples like that is going to be really helpful. So I think that could be something we're flagging that we could specifically be learning from. That might be too in the weeds. I don't know. Sorry, just you got my brain.
No, and the stack is also really concerned about helping people understand that there are some questions that do not need to be addressed in exact analog locations, right? There are some that are based on first principles. There's some that are based on modeling, some based on evidence from other systems, which are applicable in terms of general principles. We went through this with the, I'll just say from my experience with the Marine Protected Areas and Marine Reserve development programs, that was a local folks are like, yeah, okay, that study there, but it doesn't apply here. Well, we all know as scientists that there are a lot of things that are generalizable, and then there are some things that are not. And so helping people distinguish between those two elements is an important educational, I think, outcome that we're hoping to help achieve or communicate.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Big priority.
Get back to Bryson's comment about Oregon shouldn't just sit on our heels for 10 years and wait to see what everyone else does. What I try to put into the recommendation for the roadmap is what I've gathered so far of things we can do to make use of the time over the next 10 years. But I'm curious what you would call or what it would look like that's practical for Oregon to do that is not sitting on our heels over the next 10 years. Some ideas I've heard about. Let's fund a fleshing out of the work that Stack is going to do to follow the prioritization framework to build out kind of the list. There's been talk of, well, let's participate in this West Coast Science Collaborative that California is starting up. And either we start cheap, which is just we send an agency representative or two, and then we have coordination within the state through OPAC or other means, or we make our own science collaborative that has our 30 seats, and then we send one or two people over to California who has their own 30 seats, and Washington who might have their own 30 seats, so that we don't all just try to make one giant table. So West Coast Science Collaborative work, which might start working down some of our list and find opportunities for efficiencies for research that California leads. Maybe we can send a little bit up Oregon's way and answer some of our questions too. So flesh out the framework, work with the West Coast Science Collaborative. There's a thought about, is there any baseline data that would be worth collecting now that wouldn't be obsolete in 10 years? I've heard some members of our roundtable really advocating, well, let's get a buoy out there now and let's start collecting data. Is that part of Oregon not sitting on its heels for 10 years? So are there other things besides what I just talked about that look like that?
I love the buoy idea, honestly, because I feel like baseline data at this point is a moving target because climate change is happening and baseline is no longer baseline, right? Everything is dynamic. But I just think that the more data, the better. But I also feel like we are in a budget constrained environment, and the odds of the state investing in a buoy just feels like good luck with that. But it's a good thing to be asking for. I think it's smart, and I think it's relevant all the way throughout the process from beginning to end for offshore wind development. I know this is not science research based, but like 100%, the state has to be thinking about transmission and procurement of clean energy in general. Like none of this happens if we don't have infrastructure for it. And the infrastructure upgrades are necessary on the South Coast, regardless of if offshore wind happens, right? It's like these are things that we need to be thinking about regionally and doing as a state. And I'm not saying that this is going to come out of this working group, but I'm just flagging, Jeff, for me, like the areas where we cannot afford to sit on our hands not just for the sake of offshore wind, but just for the sake of like hitting clean energy targets, energy resilience, is how are we going to guarantee that there are buyers for renewable energy of any kind when they come online? And how are we going to guarantee that there's a way to get that energy from wherever it's coming from to where it needs to go, right? So I think, and I feel like if we're not doing a special emphasis on the South Coast about that they're just going to get left behind, right? So I realize I'm NWF and this is a science conversation, but like those to me are things that if the state isn't getting pretty strong like directives that they can't just sit back on those two things, then like this conversation about offshore wind is just like very theoretical, you know what I mean? So
Rena?
Yeah, and I think the other thing I mean, this is relative to what you were saying, Julia. I agree. The state, from a policy perspective, and for this conversation to be effective, a lot of our participants are asking these questions and like, how does this relate to the energy strategy? Why are these separated? Why are these in two different boxes? That should be potentially a recommendation back. Like we need the bigger picture to understand, how this all fits together and that it's feasible, right?
Sure, but you would also hear, I think, from Odo that the energy strategy is not picking winners and losers of energy generation type. And so we can't necessarily say, hitch us to the energy strategy.
No, but understanding what do we need to meet the state's energy goals? What are some ways forward? And a lot of people are making assumptions based on economics today, but economics tomorrow may be very different. And so there's a lot of that too. That's kind of like people are very like, well, today it doesn't make sense financially. And I was like, well, yeah, under this administration, especially, it doesn't make sense maybe. But um, that, lots of different energy and infrastructure projects that are of national importance or state, at this scale are subsidized and are supported by other mechanisms. And so it's kind of I don't know. It's just sort of we'll see what comes out of our economists who are on the stack, but I feel like that's kind of a strange space to be pegging all your decision making on what it is today.
and I do think I see your hand. I do think that is it possible in your opinion, Jeff, to include high level directives or recommendations around what is necessary for offshore wind to have? I mean, I feel like that's what the roadmap is for, right? And I think
Yeah.
we need to be able to say, like, I think one of the things that needs to be like put in writing is that, California, if they get offshore wind coming in to Humboldt, that's geographically very close to the South Coast. And it's like, given how much of a question mark there is around when and how offshore wind could happen in Oregon, I think it'd be really wise for us to be trying to have conversations with California about, is there a way for that power to be coming up to the South Coast a little bit for resiliency, right? And then when and if we build energy, it can all, you know what I mean? It can all be connected, but it's like if we're not resourcing that uh that conversation, that regional approach, then I mean I think Californian decision makers are very cognizant of that being something worth approaching at a regional level, but I don't know if they are like if that's being reciprocated, and that's just like words on paper or things people say out loud in meetings. I don't know what's actually happening with it. But if Oregon is not putting any attention toward that, then it's definitely not going to happen, right? So it's like I feel like our recommendations, whether or not we're directly coordinated with or tied to the energy strategy, have to be real about saying we need transmission and we need a guarantee that this energy is going to be purchased, like in order for any of this to be worthwhile. Like that just has to be part of the recommendation somehow. Like, and I don't exactly how we land that plane. We should keep having that conversation, but it just anyway, I feel like I'm repeating myself now. Sorry.
Oh,
So
Bryce.
yeah, a lot there. I'm trying to remember. I had a couple points, and of course, that jumped from my mind. Um, I think important one, how this ties into the energy strategy is an important one to do because the economics aren't fully baked yet. And to run those models that they're going to run, it's not going to properly include offshore wind unless you've been given directives to look at different scenarios of offshore wind O&M. And and those O&M numbers are going to change dramatically depending on what California does. So I think there's a need for a sensitivity study focused on offshore wind, given that it has the potential to be sort of a game changer for the state. So they can run their model, and that's great, and they should. But I think there should be a focused effort just for offshore wind, just to look, hey, where and when does this cut in or not? Because I don't think that's in their scope of work right now. I think the other thing in terms of not sitting on a hand, yes, transmission's got to get built, 100%, no debates there. But I think we can also look to Karina's point about what's generalizable and what's not generalizable, and I think we can start to highlight things that are generalizable. You know, if I'm thinking about this as an engineer, I'm like, okay, we have a port construct. Let us go spend some time and work and collaborate with international peers who are looking at similar issues, and let's start to work with them so that when we bring technology to the coast, or if we bring technology to the coast, it might be different, and maybe we don't need $2 billion port investments to make this work. And if we don't participate in that, we may not get a technology output that works for scenarios. So I think there's equivalency in terms of like environmental conditions, but then there's also equivalency in terms of infrastructure that one has in order to facilitate this. So I think taking a couple different perspectives on what's needed is important.
That is as a refinement of the just keep track of the technology, but like true international knowledge sharing of how Oregon's specific problems about infrastructure development, port development might be, the scenario might change based on some new innovation elsewhere.
100%. We're not a unique little flower, Oregon, in the fact that we don't have great ports. There are lots of other countries who want to do what we want to do, but don't have great ports. So I think participating in that is an important thing for us to watch. Not flower. What is the saying? We're not a unique little snowflake all on
Unicorn.
Something like that.
We're not a little unicorn.
Yeah, exactly.
We do get a lot of I'll just say, very local thinking and kind of constrained around, in a lot of our public process in the state. I just noticed that a lot. And it's a little bit of, different mindset than those of us in universities and sort of thinking more broadly bring to the table, I'll just say.
Yeah, it's kind of cultural.
It's a little bit cultural. It's a little bit,
Yeah.
But, you know, we have to be aware of that. I mean, the local concerns are very important. I'm not trying to diminish them at all. I'm just saying that that is part of the challenge sometimes of talking with each other.
Well, and also Oregon has very unique laws. Every state has its own laws, but we're the only state with like the land use policies that we have. When we don't have people in California are like, well, what about your CEQA process? And I'm like, don't have one, right? You know what I mean? And it's just like, it is actually literally different in Oregon. So yeah.
Can I ask a broad question? Sort of, it seems like we're going all over the show here, Jeff. I don't know. We're sort of
No, we're good. We're
Is
fine.
this what you were looking for? Okay.
Yeah.
You know, I read the document, of course, and I think Julia sort of brought this up and Karina hit on it before. You know, some of the language is pretty direct or sort of binary on like before leasing shall not occur before this. And I'm like, well, how do you answer these questions before that? It seems somewhat impossible. And then I'm like, okay, even if you could, who's going to fund it? Because you're not going to get any industry money if you don't do that. So I was sort of being like, how do you've got to move the process to get the money so you can float it, so you can understand it. And I was like, my read of this was very sort of binary. We either have all the answers when we walk in, which we know is an impossibility because climate change is happening. We don't know what the technology. That's just not a real solution. So how do you see these two worlds? Like it seems like maybe it's under the adaptive management process, but there sort of seems in my read there's a conflict between some of the very binary nature of the language and then this sort of we'll use an adaptive management process. So how do you circle that square?
Well,
I'll just say
Stack
I'll just say Stack brought that up, that we're going to deal with that a little bit. Like what is reasonable to do ahead and what needs to be deferred. But Jeff, go ahead.
I'm glad that you're doing that, Julia. I'm glad you're doing that too. I wrote this to be provocative, Bryson, by saying this, like a cumulative impact assessment has to happen before leasing is something that I've heard over and over again in the roadmap process.
Mhm.
And I want to reflect it. But we've also been bringing up throughout the process that this does present a dilemma. And it's the exact dilemma that you mentioned, that if we want this information early, we have to pay for it.
Mhm.
And if we're willing to wait and let leasing proceed at the risk of the developers, then presumably, because we require cumulative effects as part of our federal consistency decision at the COP stage, that there would need to be some cumulative assessment brought then. And then it would be the responsibility of developers with presumably federal support, at least under the prior structure, to help answer some of those questions. But now what we are building with this roadmap has a new step zero. And that step zero includes the expectation of some sort of cumulative impact assessment before leasing.
Mhm.
It includes building an Oregon specific research agenda and then hopefully binning what needs to be known when.
Yeah.
We have not gotten to that resolution of conversation in the roadmap process. And I'm hoping that the work that's being done off to the side will help us get there. But then we also have this West Coast Science Collaborative that's getting spun up. And I guess I have a naive hope that when that gets spun up, that California is also asking some questions about cumulative effects and the carrying capacity of the California current ecosystem, or how
Mhm.
much offshore wind it can handle. And if that's something that we can address as a region, and if there's a recommendation in the roadmap to say, we need to support the work of the West Coast Science Collaborative to develop this cumulative impact assessment that we need to feel comfortable moving into the leasing development stage. It may not be the cumulative assessment that answers all questions, but it may be at an elevation that it answers some of those basic questions about, using a project design envelope with some sensitivity parameters, understanding the potential scope of how broad offshore wind development could be. We have a general understanding of, if we start here, we know we're at least still under the ceiling.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm. Okay.
it's a thought, but it is a dilemma.
I
Yeah.
totally want to build on what you just said, Jeff, because I think what we're starting to hone in on, and then I'm only just now starting to hone in on this. I've been here for like a little over a year and a half, and like I was really like on board with the cumulative impact request. But what I'm realizing is that like we need to get really clear about what you literally can know, because it's like a cumulative impact would require a level of granular understanding of what's actually going to be built where, and that information doesn't exist at that stage, right? So I think we got to get really clear about what a cumulative impact process looks like if you're not at the stage that you have enough specificity to do a full cumulative impact, right? So I think that like that's part of what I think we're hoping to get to with
But
these processes that Karina
Julia,
and yeah.
the paper I just put in there, I was involved
Yeah.
in a process for assessing individual and cumulative impacts of permitting additional research activities in marine protected areas where we were not supposed to be, where no other take was allowed. And the idea was to keep these in near pristine, like absent human take or impacts. And we developed a framework for how to do that in an iterative way that was California Department of Fish and Wildlife. We did that at their request, and they use this tool now. So we have a set of activities that are happening in this geography. We know what habitats are in there. We know what the researcher wants to do. So we understand what the project is. And we have a framework for assessing, okay, well, if they're scraping 10 plots like this, what does that mean? And if we have 20 projects doing that, what does that mean? At what point do you say no, right? Right. If you have too many people coming in to do a research project in an area that's supposed to be protected, when are the cumulative impacts too much? How long does it take for that project when it's done to recover, like that area to recover to what it is? And so there are frameworks for doing things like that have a starting point, what we know now, and that look at things that are kind of theoretical but have some scope. But again, it needs a construction and operation plan, right? Like we can't evaluate that until we know what the project is and what it involves. Like, are they going to be pouring stuff into the water? Are they going to be scraping all animals off? Are you just collecting one animal? How many animals? What proportion of the population is that? Like there's a lot of questions that you have to answer to kind of get there. But this is an example of one way of doing something like that.
Highlight a couple things that I put into the draft recommendation language and see how close or far it is from some of the ideas in our heads here. Bryson, you pointed out that there's some binary language here where we say before leasing, Oregon needs to understand the cumulative capacity of the California current large marine ecosystem to accommodate offshore wind technology from an environmental and socioeconomic perspective. Further leasing should not progress until a cumulative impact assessment has been completed. But here's the caveat. This cumulative assessment need not be based on the specific configuration or technology of a future project in the lease area, but sensitivity analysis of the relative effects from a range of likely project proposals should be included. So we could say, you know, if we've got 15 gigawatts total off of Oregon versus 1 gigawatt total, and if it's tension lake platforms versus catenary, and if it's tight versus loose, like you can run potentially some scenarios to say, what's the greater or lesser? When do we know that it's become an unacceptable effect to the ecosystem or to the socioeconomic, like area closures? What are those things to watch out for so that we can place this one decision in the context of the larger ecosystem, including California? That seems like a more attainable thing over the next 5 to 10 years, especially if we're working with a West Coast Science Collaborative. But if I'm wrong, tell me. And then we say before, this is at the COP stage. So we say before we issue a decision at the COP, then we expect everything on our research agenda wish list to be resolved such that there's sufficient evidence of consistency. So we're not saying perfect certainty. We are saying consistency with our policies, which may allow for some amount of uncertainty to exist if there is like an adaptive management process, et cetera, but maybe that needs to be better explained in there. And we do talk about how the manner in which uncertainties may be resolved does include something like adaptive management. So we're trying to acknowledge that there are multiple ways to address uncertainty. The one last thing I wanted to point out, if I can find it, right here, funding support needs. The funding and implementation of a cumulative impact assessment is uncertain. It's unlikely that a federal agency will lead it. Similarly, the offshore wind industry is unlikely to invest in this if they don't know that they have leases. So, I mean, it's right there to say this is part of the trade-off we're making. And then I put out there that the state of Oregon should work with the West Coast Science Collaborative or regional university to lead a cumulative assessment supported by a variety of funding sources, including the state. And absent this, it's unlikely that a leasing decision would be supported by a cumulative impact statement.
Yeah.
So like, that's where we're at. And the fallback position is basically what we did last year, where we said, okay, then we lease without it, even though we're saying it should be there. We're allowing that a fallback, and people might push back on this and have it get cut. But to say the fallback is just to follow the federal process where leasing can proceed, but it's at risk. And if the developers can't bring that cumulative assessment at the COP stage, then we object, the project can't move forward, and then essentially the lease gets forfeited. So it all comes down to who's holding the bag of risk at what time.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, and I guess I should caveat everything. I'm not a cumulative impact assessment expert. I don't know. I'm sure there's some really good like structured approaches where it's like some feasibility and then some reconnaissance and then design level. So I don't know that stuff. I was really just trying to figure out how do we, you know, the caveat. I think we all agree with what you've written or what I don't want to say just you, Jeff, that's written on the page here. Is there not a middle path where we can get some funding and you can move it? Like, can you add a second stage in this process where the developers feel like they've offloaded some of the risks, so they're willing to invest, but the state's not holding all the bag? I don't know. Like we sort of ended up on these, well, we got this path where we're going to have no money and the state's probably not going to fund it. Or we got this path where we follow the federal process. And I'm trying to, and maybe it's overly simplistic. I do have a general tendency to overly simplify things. So
I
Yeah,
think Jeff does have layers in here though. Like one is the
Yeah.
state does it on its own, or we do it in partnership with California. We find multiple sources of funding. We work with the state university, right? It's like I think you are outlining like there's multiple paths to cobble together something resembling a cumulative impact, but it'll be work and money, and the
Mhm.
degree of which how much that is the state or not is to be seen, right? But it's going to be some amount of money from the state, right? It's not going to be zero, right? And that's always a heavy lift. But I do feel like you did kind of capture that nuance in how you framed it, Jeff. Like,
I guess universities aren't a source of funding. They're a sink of funding.
no, we're gonna have to
right.
fund them,
No.
right? Yeah, no,
So-
they might be able to get some grants, maybe.
And I'm sure the West Coast Science, I don't know who's funding the West Coast Science. Are they also a sink of funding, or where's the money going in to do the work?
California's
Through
the
the ocean
primary
protection,
source of
yeah, the state is investing in
state.
that
Oh,
right
okay.
now.
Okay.
I mean, they
Well,
fund
the state
grants
gives,
and all kinds of
was it
things.
3? Yeah.
it's seed funding, 3 million from the state legislature to get it up and running. It's not clear to me yet whether the lessees are going to be pitching in, how that all is going to go. There's probably some hope and expectation that the state of Oregon pitches into the West Coast Science Collaborative if we're going to be participants.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
so
Okay.
yeah,
I mean, I
which
think
I think I
another,
included that.
did you include something? I mean, I do think we should, yeah, action and coordinate. Yeah, I do think we should say that we view positively the regional approach just because of the California current ecosystem and the way
Yeah.
fishing works and all that and the
Oh yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
Regional approach for actually
And-
literally all of it. Regional
Yeah.
approach for supply chain, for transmission, for
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah, well, and this part of the recommendation is still a bit skeletal because we're waiting to see what Abby gives us out of California.
Right.
But the general idea is California's kicking this thing off. It's going to have some objectives that I'm still kind of uncertain about.
Mhm.
I describe what the benefits would be for the state to participate in the West Coast Science Collaborative. And then I offer two options.
Okay.
One being that Oregon creates our own version of a multi-party science collaborative so that we have a full table that can talk to California's full table. Because they're going to fill 30, 40 seats in their own table. They don't have room for us to bring all of our people to. They're going to save us maybe one seat or two. And so if we want that one seat to be representative, do we need to invest in making our own group that can basically, Karina, like what you said, flesh out our research agenda, work through our prioritization framework, and then send an emissary to the West Coast Science Collaborative. The cheaper option, which may be the nearer term option, is state agencies participate in the West Coast Science Collaborative. And then to support representative participation, we either convene our own meetings, to report, and that could be through OPAC, through some other means, to just try to keep the window open while it's less urgent for Oregon, frankly. And then maybe at some point we graduate from option 2 to option 1. But this also says action is needed by the legislature to fund and direct Oregon's involvement in the West Coast Science Collaborative. That could be direct participation. That could be just pitching in. So.
Okay.
And there have been high-level meetings with Governor Kotek where she has agreed that this is a good idea. But obviously that does not in any way get you to the legislature. But like I feel like it would be good to see. I mean, if this is something that the governor puts in her budget, that's like half the battle, right? So I think that's an approach we need to be really thoughtful about.
Mhm.
Because I don't think we're talking about huge money if we're doing the lowest common denominator here. And if she just throws that in her budget, like that's half the battle. But like, anyway, I'm just thinking about the how of it.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
you can't put that in the report. I'm just saying, like, I think it's good for us to know that, like, that's something that she has in the past, at least, committed to. We don't know where the current governor in Washington is on this, but like, Kotek has been supportive.
So this is in your inboxes. If you have recommendations for what to punch up, what to reframe, please send it in. We're going to keep having these calls throughout the month. If you can participate, great. If you just want to send me feedback that I can then bring to the rest of the group and try to turn into one combined product by the end of August so that the first draft of the full roadmap can be available in September and have some version of this that will likely get marked up again. But I think today we talked about kind of the big parts of this, and now it's just down to the words. So I appreciate that. I'm happy to stay on for another hour, but I know we're losing half of our people. So if we want to call it here, that's okay too. Or if you want to walk through and talk about any of it, I'm here.
We lost a couple of, I think I brought up most of the comments I had when I read through Jeff. We've discussed them as we go. And we do have a conference I'm organizing on Monday, so I could use the hour. But no, I think this is good to help me come up to speed and help out here. Yeah, so most of my comments we've discussed today, so I'm happy with where we're at for right now.
Right.
Yeah, and Jeff, yeah, I've been listening in. This has been a great conversation to follow along, and might have some feedback for you, in my internal ODFW offshore wind team on some of these concepts. Knowing that if we were to stand up our own Oregon specific committee here, collaborative, it would likely be pulling staff from our respective agencies and others, and just.
Yeah.
And even if funding is there to help organize meetings, that it's just another workload consideration. So with that perspective lens, that I think my comments might be. So, but,
and
important
Justin,
topic.
to that point, my expectation would be that we put it in here as an action for the legislature with the thought that the legislature would then send a request for a fiscal impact statement. Oh, what would it take to participate in this and give us that opportunity so that we don't have to put dollar figures in the roadmap?
Yeah, a handful of limited duration positions or so that might be something that might be some of our impact here, but our input. So I don't really have with this just a brief group here. Don't know if we have more topics to cover myself. So.
Well, in that case, let's enjoy our Friday afternoons. Thank you for a good conversation, and we'll be doing another one of these. I can't remember, maybe on the 20th, if I remember right. We're staggering the community benefit work group in this one, but yeah, love to see you again, and thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks. Cheers all.